The climate insider he had come to discover was like springtime in the Midwest. She was a woman full of tornadoes waiting to happen. And if he had been a farmer observing a sky, which looked the way Annie's face looks right now, he would have at once gone to collect his family and herd them into the storm cellar. Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. So today, like the title says, I wanted to talk about Stephen King. This is because I realized that even if I read a lot, one of my big blind spots, which I've known has been for a while, I was conscious of it, but somehow recently I started thinking about it more, is Stephen King. So obviously, Stephen King is one of the most famous authors, one of the most prolific authors, but for some reason I had read none of it. So I decided to finally fill this gap in my knowledge and to document my journey and share it with you. Stephen King doesn't need an introduction, but for the sake of the video, he's an American author who is born in Portland, Maine, and most of his stories are set indeed in Maine. He's one of the most prolific authors with, a bibliography of north of 70 books. And so it was really hard to decide where to start. But indeed, after some research, I had narrowed down the books that I wanted to start with. Sorry, let me get my notebook. I have here some of my Stephen King notes. Stephen King is also known as the King of Horror, and this is because this is indeed his preferred genre. He writes a lot of horror, fantasy, dystopian books. He's a very prolific author, and in a famous interview with George R.R. Martin, the writer of the Game of Thrones series, when Martin asked him, "How do you manage to write so much?" he famously replied, "I write, but at some point I stop and I publish." So that gave me a very long list to choose from, and I finally managed to narrow it down to 3 plus half book. So let me explain. The first book that I want to start reading is Carrie. This is Stephen King's first published novel. What I know about it, and again, I haven't read the plot too much, but what I know about it is that it talks about this teenage girl who is severely bullied at school, but she has a special power. She has TK or telekinesis, and so she goes on a massive vengeance rampage. This is what I know. I also know that there is a famous story again behind this book, which is that Stephen King actually wrote the novel and then threw it away, and his wife fished it back out from the dumpster. So actually on Wikipedia I read that it was only the first few pages that he threw away, and then she brought them back and said that she wanted to know how the book finished. So yes, thanks to Tabitha, Stephen King's wife, we have this book which very much launched his career. So this is the one I'm going to start with. After that, I'm going to continue with Misery. So the reason why I chose Misery is again because I heard the plot, I know the plot vaguely, and it sounds super interesting to me. So the story is basically that there is this famous author who writes this book series where Misery is the main character, and he has a massive car accident and is rescued by his number one fan, who basically traps him in her house, and when she discovers that he kills Misery in the last book of the series, she goes nuts, and she famously says the words which, even if I haven't read the book or haven't seen the movie, I know, which is Misery cannot die. So this is the second book I want to read. And this ends the novels of Stephen King that I'm gonna try reading. I also picked up on Writing, which is Stephen King's mix memoir and writing manual. He calls it a memoir of the craft, and this is is the book where Stephen King retells his journey with writing and kind of gives us some pointers of how to write. Well, I assume. So I'm gonna also read this. I actually may also partly read the book and partly listen to the audiobook when I'm going to work or when I'm outside. The audiobook is narrated by Stephen King, which I always like when it's the authors narrating their books. And so, yes. The final thing that I wanted to mention is that actually I also will watch a series that it's on Hulu. It's based on a Stephen King novel and it's called 11/22/63, which I'm not American, but I understand that it's the date when JFK died. So this is a dystopian novel, and this is something else that Stephen King does sometimes. He writes horror, fantasy and everything we talked about, but he also writes these historical dystopian novels, and the basic of the story is, what if you can go back in time, prevent JFK from dying, and how will the war change? So the book is really thick, it's over 800 words, so I've decided, because I really like James Franco and he's the star in the series on Hulu, that instead of reading the book I would watch the series while I'm reading Stephen King's other books. Also, Stephen King was obviously involved in the production of the series, so it would be very complementary to this Stephen King's discovery journey that I'm doing. So yes, I hope you're excited as I am to discover Stephen King finally, decades after the rest of the world had discovered him, but better late than never. And we're gonna start with reading some of Carrie now. This is for Tabby, who got me into it and then bailed me out of it. My god, so as I mentioned, I didn't know much about the plot and I was not aware of the first scene. I am like, wow, that was quite something. I don't know if a male author writing this first scene is brave or just completely out of it. Like, what is happening? This first scene. So basically how the book starts is that there is this scene in gym class and Carrie, the protagonist, who is already very much bullied and everything and everyone hates her for some reason, she has this scene in the shower where she's 16 but she gets her first period, but it's not like a normal period like the rest of us gets it. She kind of pours blood from her hua and yeah, so Carrie turned off the shower, it died in a drip and a gurgle. It wasn't until she stepped out that they all saw the blood running down her leg. Like, I don't know where Stephen King got his facts about menstruation, but usually not that much. Basically got to the second part, which is prom night. So the way the book works is that basically it's divided in 3 parts, but the last part is only a few pages, and so the first 2 parts basically make up 95% of the book. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's kind of crazy to think that it's Stephen King's first novel because it's so well written already, although I think there are a few things that kind of indicate so that give away that maybe it's a first novel. What I like especially is the way the book is narrated, so sort of a little short. is the way the book is narrated. So it's so the book doesn't have any chapters, it only has these 3 parts, but then within the part there is no division in chapters. It's narrated through a mix of normal storytelling, through different viewpoints, but then there are some parts that are taken from books, and from scientific studies that kind of enrich the narration and how we get information about Carrie and about what happened on this prom night. So we already know that something really bad is going to happen on this prom night and a bunch of kids are going to die. This is information that we are given from the start.
Why did I want to write about writing? What made me think I had anything worth saying? The easy answer is that someone who has sold as many books of fiction as I have must have something worthwhile to say about writing it. But the easy answer isn't always the truth. Colonel Sanders sold a hell of a lot of fried chicken, but I'm not sure anyone wants to know how he made it.
I finished Carrie, and obviously, it ended with more menstrual blood. So there is this character, Sue, who finds Carrie dead, and what happens when she finds Carrie dead? And suddenly vented itself in one howling, cheating scream as she felt the slow course of dark menstrual blood down her thighs. Like, someone should tell Stephen King that this is not how period works. I understand why an editor getting this first novel would really see the potential in an author, like even if the villains are a bit one-sided and there is not a lot of, just excavation in each character, but still, like, the story is very entertaining, is very creepy throughout. Obviously there is no happy ending in this book, like everyone is dead pretty much, but there is still some sort of satisfaction in Carrie going and taking her revenge. It's too bad that she also has to die. So it's still a bit early tonight, so I think I'm gonna start watching 11/22/63. I always have issues with that because I think the title is with the American date, so you have the month first and then the day and then the year, but in my European brains wants to say 22/11/63, so I always get confused. Anyways.
What the fuck was that? That was October 21st, 1960.
So I've also just started reading Misery. I'm about 40 pages in, and so what has happened so far is that, as I knew already, the main character, Paul, the writer, has got into this car crash, and he has been rescued by this woman, Annie, who took him under her care, one might say, or kidnapped is another way of saying it, and we're just getting a sense that she is a bit nuts. You owe me your life, Paul. I hope you'll remember that. I hope you'll keep that in mind. there are some scenes at the start during these pages of basically his captivity. He's in a lot of pain, his legs are shattered, so he really depends on this very strong medicine that Annie gives him, and she uses this as a bit of a blackmail. And then closer to page 40, is where I stopped reading and picked up the camera, the famous sentence came out of the book, because she read the last of the Misery novels and she saw that Misery dies, and she is not happy about that. And here we have it. She can't be dead. Annie shrieked at him. Her hands snapped open and hooked close in a faster and faster rhythm. Misery cannot be dead. Actually, I skipped the last name. You can see there is a last name, but I like it better, the version Misery cannot be dead. I am about halfway through Misery. See here. I must say that I am enjoying it very much. I like the way it's written. I think you can clearly see a jump in style from Carrie, which was, the first published novel by Stephen King. It's basically only 2 characters set in this pretty much in one location, which is the Annie's house, where the author Paul Sheldon, I think, is trapped. And halfway through the novel, there have already been a few of the outbursts against our writer, and he's been abused in a few ways, and he's now writing what Annie wanted him to write, which is Misery's Return. But I was also reading or listening to the audiobook of On Writing. The first third of the book is kind of Stephen King's memoir, and he kind of quickly goes through his writing history, I think pretty much up to the 2000. I really like the fact that the audiobook is read by Stephen King. I love to listen to audiobooks narrated by the author, and Stephen King, I don't know, he has this very funny tone, he makes a lot of voices, he's very sarcastic, so it's really a great read. Only one criticism I read on that part is that he kind of goes very quickly on how he got his first publication of Carrie, and he kind of just mentioned this friend of his in a publishing house that he knew when he sent his manuscript, and it was kind of accepted. And so one of the criticism I read is that it's a bit I don't know, maybe it's a bit simplified, or in any case it's not something that would happen anymore in this day and age. This is not how books get published anymore. And for Misery especially, he was talking a lot about his drug addiction and alcoholism, and how for him Annie came to represent cocaine and alcohol, and how he felt he was the pet writer of these substances, just like Paul is the pet writer for Annie. I'm going to continue now reading Misery. Oh my god, she cut his foot right off. That was incredibly graphic. I finished reading Misery and On Writing. So I loved Misery, but oh my god, reading Carrie and Misery back to back, like I need a break from horror and probably from Stephen King's writing. I think later I'm just gonna read a rom-com or something very light. No, I mean, Misery was good. So there was obviously there was a spoiler disclaimer at the start, so I'm just gonna talk about the ending. I like the fact that Paul Sheldon was not saved by cops, even though towards the end we have like a lot of cops showing up and investigating, and obviously we're rooting for someone to find him and put him out of his misery, there you go, and just save him. But then at the end he saves himself, which I think still is really good. It's it's probably the best ending, even though we are on the edge of our seat throughout. Clearly by the end his brain is completely, but I think I know, because I heard Stephen King talking about Misery on writing, that the point of the story was also for him to show how the act of writing can save us, especially when we're writers like Stephen King or Paul Sheldon. And so the act of writing Misery Returns kept Paul Sheldon alive throughout, and in the end going back to writing new novels and new books is what we see will fix his brain in some way, or push him to overcome this trauma that he went through. And obviously there is the parallel here with what Stephen King went through and what he speaks about in the end of On Writing, which is his own near brush with death when the van hit him. There are a lot of parallelism in the sense that Paul Sheldon had, his legs completely destroyed by the car crash, and same Stephen King had his legs broken in like 12 spots or something like that when the van hit him. And again, he went through a long time without writing while he was recovering, but then he finally went back to it, and he was nervous, he wasn't sure, he was actually writing the book on writing, but then that's what sort of gave him the push to also overcome this traumatic experience he went through. Yeah, so I really liked Misery much more than Carrie, but I guess it's obvious, but I understand that Carrie is like kind of his first novel, it's a debut, so it's a completely different style. By Misery he had much more experience, but I really liked reading both of them. I loved On Writing, loved the audiobook. I now just need to finish the TV series I'm watching. I always forget the order, but it's 11, 22, 63.
Take it on, faith. Take it on, faith. That I'll love you till the day I die. I'm ready for the quiet life.